The Branham family history. A few facts recorded. Facts relating to the history of Harriet Hetty Cook, compiled by Lou Fancher, the daughter of Benjamin Franklin, first, and Harriet Cook, in October 1971. Sampson Branham Sr. and Priscilla Gordon Branham were my great-grandparents. Sampson Branham Sr. was born in 1800 in Georgia, the same year as my paternal grandfather, Michael Connor. Priscilla Gordon Branham was also born in Georgia in 1809 and was of Pennsylvania Dutch descent. Priscilla's unusual thriftiness and energy aided Sampson in becoming a leading citizen of Coffee County, Alabama. They settled at the Branham Old Stand, a short distance from Beaver Dam Creek, about 6 miles southeast of Bullock and 4 or 5 miles north of Elba, where my grandfather Green M. Cook and Sampson and Priscilla's daughter, Lucy Ann Branham, settled and had a large fertile farm after they were married. Sampson Sr. developed a vast estate and had many slaves before the Civil War marred the growth of the South. They had 12 children, and my grandmother, Lucy Ann Branham Cook, was the second child. She was born on October 24, 1825, and died February 9, 1908. She married Green M. Cook, who was born October 10, 1822, and died January 22, 1903. To this union were born 6 girls and 2 boys. Green M. Cook's family probably came from Mississippi to Alabama. They were Sally, Eliza, Mousie, Melissa, twin of Alonzo, Hattie, and Lydia. The 2 sons were Alonzo and Billy. A tree fell on Billy and killed him when he was 16 as he walked through the woods on a Thanksgiving Day on the way to visit a friend. Am I going too fast?
No.
Sally Cook married Bill Mack and had a large family. Miles and Melissa never married, taking care of their parents in their old age. Eliza married a Mr. White and migrated to Florida and reared a large family. Hattie Connor was married on June the 3rd to Benjamin Franklin Connor, a native of Butler County, and who was born on his father's plantation about 5 miles from Greenville, Alabama, the county seat. Lydia married a Mr. Croxton, from whom she was divorced after the birth of 2 children, Rosa and Richmond, and she and they lived with her parents until the parents died. She then moved to Elba, where she became a dressmaker. She died there and is buried in Evergreen Cemetery at Elba. She had a fine mind, read widely, did beautiful handwork, embroidery, made Battenberg and point lace. Sampson and Priscilla Branham's graves are just above the Angus Vaughan farm, where there are a few graves near Beaver Dam Creek Church, a primitive Baptist church, of which they were active members. A few things that I remember about my mother's family. Grandfather Cook fought in the war between the states. He hunted deserters, and at first he felt sympathy for these men, but later, after facing the hardships, he lost all sympathy for them. When I was a little girl, he was my hero. He made much of me and loved for me to sit on his knee and sing Yankee Doodle and so forth. He told me many stories of his war experiences. He had a great sense of humor, was a big tease, and loved practical jokes. He was also a great hunter, hunting deer, turkey, and bear after often going to Clark County to hunt the game. Before the war, my grandfather lent $900 in gold to a minister farmer. When times became very tight after all their money had been converted to Confederate dollars, and no money was coming in, and the farms were lying idle except for the mothers and little children could cultivate, the man who borrowed this gold money came and asked my grandfather if he would accept Confederate money for the debt. Money was so scarce, and my grandfather agreed to accept it. Later that day, my grandfather heard that the Confederate money had been declared void. He always thought the man knew of this before he came to my grandfather with this offer. My mother was born in this home and married from the same place. That's not clear. Where my grandfather and grandmother started their married life. Vacations at my grandparents' home are among my fondest memories. Picnics.
Is this the home located where?
It's out 12 miles above Elba.
On the Brantley Highway? That's where your mother took me by there.
Yeah. Vacations at my grandparents' homes are among my fondest memories. Picnics at the spring at the foot of a hill, going to the fields to gather and eat watermelons, which we bursted on stumps and ate on the spot. Playing in the same barn where my mother played as a little girl, playing hide and seek with the other grandchildren, then lying down on the porch listening to our elders until we went to sleep, then being roused to go to the back porch to wash our feet, riding the neighbors' young yearlings, being chased through the pasture by a bull, sleeping on the floor when there were numbers of grandchildren there. The Cook farm was at the edge of the little village of Bullock, over where there was a post office, 2 stores, and a primitive Baptist church and schoolhouse, where my mother attended when she was a girl. When she was a girl, there was a boarding school, but she was a day student. Let's see. She and her sister Lydia were voracious readers. They read every book they could get their hands on. Both of them should have been teachers, as their teachers advised. As we went to the village to spend our nickels, I remember how an old goose would chase us as we cut through the pasture to save time, hissing because she was afraid we'd hurt her goslings. She didn't guess that we were just as afraid of her. Sitting on a long kitchen bench, eating my auntie's wonderful feed preserves at breakfast is one of my nicest memories. It's funny how you remember. My mother often told us of her ancestors. I believe they were my grandfather Cook's family, traveling from South Carolina to Alabama, how they left in their carriage, hiring an Indian to shadow them all the way as a protection against other Indians. They never saw him during the day, but he always appeared when they stopped for the night. At a fort where they spent the night, they were told that they could never make it to Alabama in their carriage, and they sold the carriage they sold the convenience and made other arrangements for continuing their journey. Indians attacked the fort the night after they left and massacred everyone. Contrary to what the settlers told them at the fort, they could have completed their travel in their carriage. And that's as far as I've gotten. You see that I've just told about her family there. Then the next I'm going to tell the things that my father told me and things that he told different members of the family that are not in that book, you know, and that other people have told me since then. Now, Betty Rogers, one of our teachers here, was from Greenville, and her people lived out in the same community where my grandfather's people lived. And she said, I said, you know, Betty, my grandfather Connor was the first person buried in Liberty Church yard. She says, well, my grandfather donated the land. And she says, your grandfather certainly had lots of land. I said, I've heard that he had 10,000 acres, but I don't know. I know he had a lot. And she said, well, he owned from that church all the way to the Greenville, which was 5 miles. And she's kept telling me I must come down and visit her so that I can meet this elderly woman whose daughter married. Let's see. She was my uncle's daughter, stepdaughter.
Where did you live? Didn't you live in Alva?
Let me see what I say here. One of them I have. You know, it all needs going over, that's what it needs, because it's words I've left out and then places that I realize my sentence are incomplete or not clear. Don't type this, just see. It says, I was born in the Nichols community near the Mount Pleasant Baptist Church in Coffee County, Alabama, where my father and mother, Benjamin Franklin, and my mother, Harriet Cook, were members. My father had been a member of the Methodist Church, as had all of his family, but this was only near church, and he said he had never been satisfied with his baptism, so they both joined this church. Well, that's an outstanding rural church I've ever known. Oh, yes, they even have a pastor, and although it's out in the country, they have a pastor, and just so many of the country churches.
Which side of Alva is this on?
I don't know whether it's below Enterprise. I think it's south of Enterprise.
Oh, I see.
The Nichols community was only a few miles from Enterprise. My father was a teacher just across the road from our farm home. He also had well drilling equipment and drilled many of the wells in that area. My birth date was January 25th, 1897, and I think I remember a snow in the spring of 1899. I can see the snow on a rose bush in our yard. When I was 4 years old, I went to the village school taught by Miss Mazzell for a day or two, and I remember the teacher calling me to come up and say my ABCs, and I was so frightened I couldn't move. And she came and switched my legs. I remember the other children going and telling my mother, and that was the end of my school days. I'm sure she was glad to get rid of me. That was the baby. When my father was elected tax collector of Coffee County, he bought a home in Alba, and I remember only one incident on that momentous day. As we loaded to leave, someone of us caught our cat and carried him, but he suddenly jumped and escaped from the wagon. This was a great loss for us children. Our family we moved to Alba in 1901.
So my mother was a year old?
Yeah. I know, let's see, she was nearly, well, I was 4, so it was when she was about 2.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I don't know exactly. And our family consisted of my parents, whom we called Mama and Papa, and 5 children: Claude, 12, who was 8 years older than I, Bonnie, 2 years younger than Claude, Ben, Annie Lou, and Idabelle, who was about 2 at the time. One of my first memories of this home was of my mother giving me a bag of my sister's, Idabelle's, clothing to take to her down at the dentist's home 2 doors beyond. Idabelle had run away on her tricycle to play with Joe Tom, Hill, the dentist's little son. This tactic on my mother's part was effective. Idabelle never ran away again. She could have to play with him. Mama got tired, and she wouldn't tell, you know. When I was 6 years old, I entered the 1st grade at Alva Public School, which consisted of all grades from 1st through the 11th. A 2-story brick building with furnace heat. But we had an outside pump and an outside toilet, although we had furnace heat. My teacher was Miss Jessie Brett, a wonderful teacher who knew just how to get the best out of a child. She lived and taught 25 years ahead, well, I should have said 50 years ahead of her day, nearly 75. Our room was so attractive with pictures, sand table, blocks, and charts, and every day was a joy to me. And Miss Jessie Brett was my idol. She had deep brown eyes with a sparkle, and I said she had gold in her eyes. Reading was so easy the way she taught it. We were taught the word method rather than by learning our ABCs. Everyone I ever saw who had Miss Brett for a teacher had wonderful memories of her. I never saw her again after that last day of that happy year, but she set the tone of school life for me, and she has always been a part of me. I say September the 22nd, 1964. I can't sleep and haven't for the past several nights. The schoolhouse in Alva was situated on Whitewater Creek, which flowed into Pea River below the bridge just beyond our lot, the lot of our home. That I
So where would that make this lot? Is it close to where the school is now?
The back of my lot, John did. It was on the creek bank.
Where there's a levee now.
Yeah. And the levee just about covers my lot, although it was 3-acre lot. It's wide.
Oh, you said.
You remember that street that goes right there? The bridge is right by our house. Right by our house.
Oh, Uncle
Uncle
Ben lived there.
He lived down the next street that went on to the bridge.
And this was the street behind.
Yeah, ours was next to the school building.
So y'all just had y'all picture. You were really close to town then, weren't you?
Yeah, just about 3 blocks at the most. Let's see. I bought that one. I bought our lot of the home I bought on Buford Street in Elba after Papa invested our farm, a home, and land and livery business. It failed because of the advent of automobile, although Papa was the first person in town to have a car, a little white Buick with divided seats, which operated in conjunction with the livery stable. Papa had beautiful horses, and he bought a lovely picnic wagon, a large bus to haul passengers to and from the train. The Atlantic coastline was the railway. To go back to the school, we had a very large, beautiful campus, I don't know how many acres, with a variety of shade trees. Is this boring you? Sort of shade trees in front and on the sides, cedar, apple, maple, pecans, and then in the back was a large pine grove which we used as playground, building wigwams of poles and pine straw, and there was a pond and a brook where asters grew on the bank and were reflected in the water, and I always connected it with the poem, Asters by the Brook. I never see those wild asters without a feeling of nostalgia. I often picked some on the edge of the Montevallo campus each year and carried them to be arranged for my girls and boys in 6th grade during 1938 to 1962. On the pond we had a raft, and the boys built it and often rowed. But one day my next door neighbor, Elizabeth Buck, got on her lawn, rowed out to the center, and dropped the oar. We were distressed until some boys waded out and pulled the raft in. We did more things that I'd be scared of my children to do than in fall and spring, we all had dog fennel, short poles with strings and bent pins on them for hooks, and we fished for crawfish, and a girl nearby sold hers each day to the fishermen uptown. She had stopped schooling to give much time to the art. When the bell rang, we all stuck our poles in the bank and ran for our rooms.
Is the Pea River ever clear? Picture is muddy looking.
Well, just after rain.
Oh, I guess.
Rain. And of course, it's always just after rain. Of course, it wasn't too clear, most of them have been polluted for years. Although we had a lovely 2-story brick building with a coal furnace, a music art teacher, also an elocution teacher. We had a great long wooden outdoor toilet, which we all despised. I remember us trying to turn it over.
How many seats? A lot of seats.
Oh, I guess about 10. It's so long. I had the 1st grade there in September 1912, and I think that said that, let's see. Moved to Florala in 1912, finished 9th grade in
Just you?
No, we all moved to
Florala.
Well, Papa decided he'd go into the wholesale banana business, and it didn't pan out, and then he started a restaurant. So I'd operated a restaurant there.
Well, he had been an elected official in Coffee County.
Yeah,
did he?
For a number of years.
Did he
9
not?
Years.
Did he not?
He lost out to Fulton by 3 votes.
To whom?
Mr. Fulton, Jim Fulton's father.
And
we sold him the home. The home where Jim Fulton's family lives now is a home. I mean, his sister lives there. Is the home that we sold to them.
Is this Ruby Ellis's home?
Since I was about 8 years old.
Is this Ruby Ellis?
Yeah, Ruby Ellis is Yeah, her sister lived there. And we sold them 4 lots, and they built, Ruby's sister built a home next door, a log cabin house, pretty thing, and then they have kept this house up and done a lot to it. It's real nice.
So you moved to Floral in 1912?
Yes. And moved to Floral in August 1912, and finished high school in 1918. However, I went to Headland and enrolled at Henry County High School for the last 2 months of my high school career.
Why did you do this?
Since my father said he had to go to the hospital to have this cancer operation.
Oh.
And so my father spent the next 2 months in Dothan at the home of his Navy, Dr. Marvin Starr, on North Foster Street. Papa had been operated on in early March. Dr. Starr assisted Dr. Earl Moody, the Moody Hospital, and found a carcinoma, that's a form of cancer, on Papa's shoulder, which was in an inoperable state. We stored our furniture, and Isabel went to stay with Bonnie, our oldest sister, and her husband,
Where was that in
Elba. Mama, Papa, and Gordon, our baby brother, stayed with the Starrs for 2 months, and then my dear brother-in-law, Walt Whitman, wrote and asked the family to move to Elba and live with them, although his business was very bad. See, we had a panic at that time. Cotton was selling for 4 cents a pound. He lost his business during the next year, but we lived with him for a year. Walter was always like a real brother. He meant so much to our family over the years, and Bonnie was always like a mother to each of us. After a few years, Walter came back to Elba and bought another drugstore and was very successful until the Elba flood of 1929 inundated the town for 3 days and nights, ruined business, greatly damaged homes, businesses, and both banks were closed.
Oh, it covered and stayed covered for 3 days?
3 days and nights. 3 days and nights.
Would it go up to the ceiling? And
it was above where the curtains were. Bonnie's baby grand piano was just a bank of mud, and it was over her dining table. It was ply walnut, and that spread out like a fan. And do you know that man that had that fern defective glue that back? And if you saw it today, you wouldn't know it had ever been done. How he did it, I don't know to say now. Because see, it looks like it would have warped so. And the piano company told Bonnie, said, "We'll give you half on new piano." Bonnie said, "That was just like that. They'll give you something if you'll give them the moon," because nobody had a penny. See, both banks failed. And Walt and Bonnie and each of the children had a bank account. Claude had a new home, a new piano, and a part of a new furniture, and his was the same.
What did Claude do? What type?
He had an automobile business.
Larry Hill. What was Ben doing at this time?
Ben always had a restaurant.
Oh. And then, what was Idabelle doing?
Now, Idabelle, let's see, at that time, no, she was living in Birmingham at this time.
Oh, this was 29?
In 1929, she was in Birmingham.
That's right, she'd been married for 9 years.
Yes, and you see, I had just moved in this house 2 weeks before the flood. I felt real wicked to have this new home, and they were all around. They came and stayed, Bonnie and the children came and stayed with me a while, and then they went to your mother's and stayed a while, and Doris often says, "I'll never forget the thing about Idabelle." Everybody was having a hard time, because from 29 on, there's nothing but panic, you know. And so, said that Uncle Richard went out and rented some cots or something, so they'd all have, a place to sleep, because, taking 4 or 5 people, something. And said he did it all. Said, I know he must have had so many responsibilities at that time, but said he was so sweet about it, she'd never forget him. And then, it took about 10 or 15 years while got on his feet. He sold that Elba drugstore. He closed one of them. He had 2 drugstores, and he closed one of them after the flood. And he and Jim had been operating the other one, and on part interest in it. See, Walt trained Jim and his younger brother, who died when he was 16. He was training both of them in the drugstore, and he coached Jim, and he took that examination before you had to go, before they passed the law where you had to go 4 years. So and Jim got rich out off that drugstore. Because see, no money left the home except Francis. paid Francis and see Idell and Jim. And then Idell came home from Sanford. She graduated later in pharmacy and took over, so they never had to put out any money. It all stayed in the family.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Walt went to Troy, and he got rich, just about. I mean, there's not a child of his that hadn't had several $1,000s apiece before he died, and then each one of them got several $1,000s after he died. I'm sure that.
Well, wasn't he going to retire when he sold the one to Jim and Elba? And
he bought this one. See, Jim had bought this one by Idell in Troy, and she wanted to come back to him.
Oh, I see. So
Walt bought it and had a marvelous vision.
Mm-hmm. I just never could understand him going to Troy. I didn't know. I thought he was retiring, and then he couldn't stand being retired.
I think he saw possibilities, and he really was a good
That's
business.
unusual. You think of people not willing to move.
Yeah, when they get older.
Mm-hmm.
And they did well, certainly did, but he worked awful hard. Walter Jr. had his baby. You remember saying that? You remember that street that goes right, the bridge is right by our house. Right by our house.
Oh, Uncle Ben lived there.
He lived down the next street that went on to the bridge.
And this was the street behind.
Yeah, ours was next to the school building.
I see. I just had y'all picture. You were really close to town then, weren't you?
Yeah, just about not over 3 blocks at the most. Let's see. I bought that one. I bought a lot of the home I bought on Buford Street in Elba after Papa invested our farm and home and land and livery business. It failed because of the advent of automobile, although Papa was the first person in town to have a car, a little white Buick with divided seats, which operated in conjunction with the livery stable. Papa had beautiful horses, and he bought a lovely picnic wagon, a large bus to haul passengers to and from the train. The Atlantic coastline was the railway. To go back to the school, we had a very large, beautiful campus, I don't know how many acres, with a variety of shade trees. Is this boring you? Sort of shade trees in front and on the sides, cedar, apple, maple, pecans, and then in the back was a large pine grove which we used as playground, building wigwams of poles and pine straw, and there was a pond and a brook where asters grew on the bank and were reflected in the water, and I always connected it with the poem, Asters by the Brook. I never see those wild asters without a feeling of nostalgia. I often picked some on the edge of the Montevallo campus each year and carried them to be arranged for my girls and boys in 6th grade during 1938 to 1962. On the pond we had a raft, and the boys built it and often rowed. But one day my next door neighbor, Elizabeth Buck, got on her lawn, rowed out to the center, and dropped the oar. We were distressed until some boys waded out and pulled the raft in. We did more things that I'd be scared of my children to do then. In fall and spring, we all had dog fennel, short poles with strings and bent pins on them for hooks, and we fished for crawfish, and a girl nearby sold hers each day to the fishermen uptown. She had stopped schooling to give much time to the art. When the bell rang, we all stuck our poles in the bank and ran for our rooms.
Is the Pea River ever clear? I mean, I always pictured it muddy looking.
Well, just after rain.
Oh, I guess.
Rains. And of course, well, it was always just after rains. Of course, it wasn't too clear. You know, most of them have been polluted for years. Although we had a lovely 2-story brick building with a coal furnace, a music art teacher, also an elocution teacher. We had a great long wooden outdoor toilet, which we all despised. I remember us trying to turn it over.
How many seats? A lot of seats.
Oh, I guess about 10. It was long. I entered 1st grade there in September 1912, and I think that said that, let's see now. Moved to Florala in 1912, finished 9th grade in
Just
Melbourne.
you?
No, we
All
moved.
of it? Why
We
did you
moved to
move to
Floral
Floral
Island. Well, Papa decided he'd go into the wholesale banana business, and it didn't pan out. And then he started a restaurant. So I'd operated a restaurant there.
Well,
2 years.
he had been an elected official in Coffee County.
Yeah,
Did
for
he?
a number of years.
Did he
was 9
not?
years.
Did he not?
He lost out
He
to
lost
Folsom by 3 votes.
to whom?
Mr. Folsom, Jim Folsom's father.
Wilson.
And we sold him the home. The same home where Jim Folsom's family lives now is the home. I mean, his sister lives there. Is the home that we sold to them.
Is this
We
Ruby
lived there
Ellis's home?
since I was about 8 years old.
Is this Ruby Ellis?
Yeah, Ruby
home?
Ellis is. Her sister lives
Mhm.
there. And we sold them 4 lots, and they built. Ruby's sister built a home next door, a log cabin house. Pretty thing, and then they have kept this house up and done a lot to it. It's real nice.
So you moved
And,
to Floral in 1912?
Yes. And moved to Floral in August 1912 and finished high school in 1918. However, I went to Headland and enrolled at Henry County High School for the last 2 months of my high school career.
Why did you do this?
Since my father said he had to go to the hospital to have this cancer operation.
Oh.
And so my father spent the next 2 months in Dothan at the home of his Navy, Dr. Marvin Starr, on North Foster Street. Papa had been operated on in early March. Dr. Starr assisted Dr. Earl Moody, the Moody Hospital, and found a carcinoma.